Charles Pearson had led the #1 column of the British invasion force across the Tugela River to establish an advanced base at Eshowe. After occupying Eshowe, Pearson was to entrench it and establish a supply base. But the British soon found themselves besieged. After receiving news that the British column under Charles Pearson was under siege, a relief column was organized by Lord Chelmsford and departed on the 29th of March to relieve the garrison. Chelmsford had a relief force comprised of 3,390 Europeans and 2,280 Africans, 2 9-pounder guns, 4 24-pounder rocket tubes, and the 2 Gatling guns. Despite traveling light, with no baggage or tents, progress was slow. Chelmsford took a route further to the east than Pearson to avoid ambush in the close country Pearson had passed through. On the 1st of April 1879, Chelmsford's column reached the royal kraal of Gingindlovu and lagered for the night. Rivers were swollen by heavy rains which fell each night, and fearing a repeat of Isandlwana, Chelmsford ensured his men spent much time lagering and entrenching their camp at the end of each day and kept ammunition boxes open. The corners of the square were reinforced by Gatling guns and artillery. Each angle was manned by the Naval Brigade, bluejackets from HMS Boadicea and Marines. The ground sloped away in all directions, allowing a good field of fire. While these defenses were being constructed, mounted scouts spotted small parties of Zulus beyond Umisi Hill. That evening, a mist covered the valley, and John Dunn made a reconnaissance. He was convinced that the mist concealed Zulu campfires and that there was a potentially large Zulu force nearby. Accompanied by Captain William Molyneux of Lord Chelmsford's staff, Dunn made his way to the Inizane, which he swam across to examine the ground beyond. Dunn found an Impi camp and narrowly avoided detection before rejoining Molyneux and reporting to Chelmsford. This Impi was composed of 12,000 warriors, some of whom were Isandlwana veterans drawn from regiments in the main Zulu army, while the remainder were warriors who lived in the vicinity of Eshowe. Some of the Zulu commanders wanted to attack Chelmsford's forces that night, but Prince Dabulamanzi Kampandi, half-brother of King Cetshwayo and commander of the Impi's right wing, convinced them to wait until morning. Fearing British aggression, Cetshwayo had started to purchase guns before the war. The Zulus now had thousands of old-fashioned muskets and a few modern rifles at their disposal, but their warriors were not properly trained in their use. Most Zulus entered battle armed only with shields and spears. However, they still proved formidable opponents. They were courageous under fire, maneuvered with great skill, and were adept in hand-to-hand combat. Most of the actions fought during the war hinged on whether British firepower could keep the Zulus at bay. At dawn on the 2nd of April, 1879, the morning sun revealed muddy ground and a heavy mist. Chelmsford had decided, after hearing Dunn's report, to not continue on toward Eshowe early the next morning. Instead, he would deploy units of the native contingent to feel for the Zulus. As the native contingent was preparing to advance, shots were heard from the night pickets still on duty. Shortly before 6 a.m., reports came in from the advanced pickets of the Zulu approach. A native soldier pointed to the skyline. "Impi," he declared. The British officers stared at the hilltop for some time before realizing that what they had taken to be a long smudge of vegetation was the mass of the advancing Zulu chest. The Impi was advancing. The main force split into 2 columns before crossing the Inizane and assuming the chest and horns formation. The left horn sharply curved to the right to assault the lager's northeast corner, while the chest gently curved toward the north face of the lager. Another force passed Misi Hill and approached the lager, forming the Impi's right horn. The buffalo formation came in at a run on the 3 sides of the lager as Chelmsford had wanted. The British infantry opened fire, supported by the Gatling guns and rockets. Zulu marksmen caused a few casualties within the laager, but the defenders kept the Zulus at bay. Though the Zulu regiments made persistent rushes to get within stabbing range, their charges lacked the drive and spirit that had pushed them forward at the Battle of Isandlwana and Rorke's Drift. The British fire checked their advance to some extent, and prompted Lord Chelmsford to order Major Barrow to make a somewhat premature charge with his mounted infantry in an attempt to check the advance of the Zulu left horn. The Zulus were quick to realize that Barrow was uncomfortably far from the laager and threatened to cut him off in the rear. Chelmsford ordered him back to the safety of the laager, but the men had to fight their way in. The only Zulu to reach the laager was a 10-year-old boy who was taken prisoner by members of the Naval Brigade and later served as a kind of mascot on their ship, Boadicea. By around 7 a.m., the Impi had been halted but had not retreated. Chelmsford ordered Major Barrow to attack once again with his mounted infantry. It was probably this maneuver that finally broke the Zulus' determination, coupled with the fact that they realized that they were unable to penetrate the laager from the rear, which they had thought poorly defended. On the appearance of Barrow's men, the Zulus broke and started their retreat, hotly pursued by the mounted infantry and the natal native contingent. The pursuit was continued for several kilometers. The Zulus lost heavily. Zulu casualties are estimated to be over 1,000. The Gatling gun and artillery in particular took a heavy toll. In addition, scores were wounded, many to die in solitude later. Hundreds of Martini Henry rifles were recovered, most of which bore the stamp of the 24th Regiment on their butts, grim reminders of the disaster at Isandlwana some 9 weeks earlier. The British lost 2 officers and 11 other ranks killed and about 50 wounded, and the dead were buried close to the Laega where they lie to this day. The battle restored Chelmsford's confidence in his army and their ability to defeat Zulu attacks. With the last resistance between Chelmsford and Pearson's columns removed, he was able to advance and raise the siege of Eshowe. This victory also allowed Chelmsford to continue his advance on Ulundi, the capital of the Zulu kingdom at the time, where he would win another decisive victory, winning him the war against the Zulus for the British.